In the black community, over $3.3 trillion in cash and credit flow through, and 97% of that money winds up in the hands of non black people. I understand why 97% of that money flows through the black community, but I'm going to talk about, a good chunk of that flows through your black nonprofits, your black civic organizations, and your black government programs. This is called the grant money hustle. What is the grant money hustle? It is where white liberals, Negro pastors, black nonprofits, black civic organizations all go out and get grant money to make profit from the misery of the Negro. This is what these organizations do. They find a bunch of Negroes who are poor and they write grants and proposals to corporations and grant makers. And they talk about how miserable and poor these Negroes are, how they will use this money to give the Negro job training, job readiness, you know, education, even social and life skills. It is a hustle. It is a $1 billion hustle. Even the colleges get in on this hustle through financial aid. And they make this money, billions of dollars, off the poverty of the Negro. And keeping the Negro poor enables these liberals and these Negro pastors, these black civic organizations, these black churches, these black nonprofits, they all make their money on keeping the Negro poor. As long as the Negro is at the bottom, they can feed at the top from the grant dollars. These grants come in the form of block grants from the federal government, private grants from nonprofit organizations such as the Clark Foundation, um, Pew Trust, a whole bunch of charitable trusts because rich people die, they put their money into a trust, and the executors of the trust look for places to distribute the money so that they can help their so-called causes. When it really is basically is a tax shelter, because when you have a nonprofit, you get a 501c3 status. And in this 501c3 status, it means you don't have to pay any taxes to the federal government. And any money that you use that or get through these grants, that means that money, if you use it for the program, you can use it. You get all these millions of dollars, and you can if you use it in the program because as long as you can itemize all the purchases in receipts, you're free to spend that money because they have something called the general operating budget, which is how some grants work. And then they have other budgets which they have to use for things like in-kind donations or, for certain specific program because they use these grants, this grant money for all. This is how they keep their company functioning. And all they have to do to keep that grant money flowing is show these people, the grant makers, the government, you know, how the money is being spent, what type of progress they're making, and how the so called program is affecting the community. Whether they have results or not, all they have to do is put it on paper because this is what they have to do. And this is the reason why I can talk about the grant money hustles because when I was working at the AmeriCorps program, at the Strive Job Readiness program, I worked in their fund development department. They taught me fund development, and this is how money is made on the suffering and the misery of the Negro. This is why your black churches, your black civic organizations, your black nonprofits, your public, not your private, your charter schools, your black colleges. This is why none of them have a vested interest in changing the condition of the Negro. They don't mind if the Negro goes to their schools or goes to their programs. They don't even mind if you complete their programs. They'll even find you a job. And the job may last maybe a year or 2 years, but they are not about helping this Negro elevate himself to another level. The whole thing with these grant money hustlers is they want to make money for themselves. And there's billions of dollars there for them to make, again, on the suffering of this Negro. And as long as he's there, with his hat in his hand, begging for that change, looking for those programs to give him something, they make $5,000 to $7,000 a head. How do I know this? Because again, I worked at the Strive program. I worked, and I understood in my training how much it costs per person. Some at the time in 2000, I think it was about 1,500 a head for this program, and all of this grant money is used, you know, to pay people salaries and keep the offices operating. And a good chunk of it, does not go to black people. This is money again, like I said, part of the 97% that flows out of the black community because the head of the Strive program was a white man named Sam Hartwell. Now the CEO was a black Rob Carmona was a black Cuban, but the chairman was Sam Hartwell was a white man. So the flow of the dollars were not going into to black hands. They were going into white hands, and this goes into many black nonprofits and black civic organizations. The heads of these on the chairmans of the board and stuff, they're all white. And yeah, there may be some black managers at the top or some black employees here and there, but for the most part, the money is going from white hands to white hands, and it's being spent on Negroes so that they can say we cleaned up these poor, miserable, downtrodden Negroes. And you're not getting a dime of this money. This is how nonprofit operates, you know. And the same structure is in any organization, just like I said before. Your nonprofits, your charitable organizations, your churches, um, your charter schools, all of them operate on the same business model. But you can't explain this to the Negro. All he's thinking about is I'm getting some job training, I'm getting some job readiness training, I'm getting some food from this pantry, I'm getting some help from this church. These people are taking money and making money off the Negro. Now, if you really wanted to help the Negro, all you have to do is open some businesses and give some of these Negroes jobs. But no, nonprofits don't want to do that. They want to make money off the Negro. They can make millions with these programs, and all they have to do is just write up a few reports, take a few pictures of a star participant or two, because it makes a nice story of this poor, miserable Negro who was on welfare. They went through the job training program, they got a job, they're now working, but they don't tell you, about how the other, members of that cycle, how they're doing. Because you might have 60, 70% of these people who may get a job in the beginning, or because what they do is they call it job placement assistance. They don't call it getting a job. Job placement assistance is where they put you in the direction of an interview. You go to the interview. Now, after that happens, as I was saying, they put it on you that you know with job placement assistance, they place you. They'll make a couple of calls, send you on an interview, and what will happen is that if you get the job or not, they can still put it down as a placement. The nonprofit still has the numbers to say that they did something for someone, and they can still continue to get this grant money. Now, this grant money also comes in housing because I live in a building where the landlord now is trying to get $1 billion grant. You know, he's gotten $1 billion grant to renovate all of his apartments, again at the expense of these Negroes, expense of these Hispanics and Negroes, really just all Negroes. Living in the Section 8. So he just makes these grants and proposals, writes them up, and talks about how I'm going to make all this money off these Negroes. Because as long as they're poor, as long as I have a group of miserable, poor, despondent Negroes, I can make $1 billion in block grants, government grants, corporate grants, and just sit there, living well off the money. Because this is how these guys get their salaries paid. Because they always make sure they pay themselves first. And then after they've paid themselves first, what they do is they go out and they hire subcontractors or they hire employees, and those employees go out and do the work for them for a small fraction of the cost. And then these people buy materials and stuff, or these people run the program for them, And as long as they can itemize the purchases and expenses, they have carte blanche. This is how the grant money hustle works, and it works in every organization the same way. Again, same business model. But you try to explain this to the Negro, and he'll give you that blank look like this, because he can't digest the ideas. He has no critical thinking skills, and he has no idea of how to, fight this exploitation. The only way to fight this exploitation is to build your own businesses, build your own infrastructure. But he doesn't. Again, Negro doesn't want to do this because he's codependent on white supremacy. He needs that phantom white person to make an excuse for why he's not doing anything, because this white person is expressing them. But this is the irony: is what happens is this is how these nonprofits come in and make their money on this Negro. This is how these churches make their money on this Negro. This is how these new guys, I like to call them, your charter schools, come in and make this money on the Negro. They come in and they promise services to help bring the Negro up. But when you look at, over the last, like I said, 15, 20 years, like with the Strive program where I worked at, in 2000 they said 80%, you know, retain their jobs over 2 years. The number, the last time I checked, is now 60% of these people retaining their jobs over 2 years. It might even be 40% at this point. But it shows you, that how the nonprofit game works. Because the nonprofit game, again, is about numbers, it's about money, and it's about keeping, getting tax write-offs for rich people. This is what they do. They get a grant, they give you this grant, they give you this endowment, and they use it to write, the wealthy use this to write off their taxes, It's because if you have enough losses or you have enough donations, you can deduct this money and, not have to pay any taxes. So they use the Negro as a way to get their taxes written off. They use the Negro as a way to make money on other people. You know, they make their money on the Negro. This is the same money that the Negro could make on his own. If he decided to get his own 501c3, he could make, like your Negro pastor. Negro pastor could go out, he can go out and make his own businesses using his 501c3 status and make money for his own people. But he doesn't want to do that because he's still making money with these white people. And he's getting his cut and he's using it to live very well off the Negro. And when you look at the Negro, you wonder, when is he ever going to wake up? When is he ever going to take a look at himself and say, look, you're the one being exploited here. Everyone is making money off of you, but you're not making money off yourself. And this is the sad part, when it comes to this Negro. He doesn't see that everybody's making money off of him, and they're making billions of dollars. They give him $100, or they'll give him a free apartment, or they'll give him a EBT card, and he'll think he's done well. When in actuality, he's gotten crumbs from the master's table. He's gotten nothing in return for what he could have gotten. He could have gotten a piece of cake, if he had learned the recipe for making cake and learned how to build his own business. He could have been making cake. But no, he'd rather take the crumbs while the nonprofit, makes money off him. Yeah, they give him a nice little graduation, nice little certificate. These certificates cost like 2 cents to make. They have no actual value. You go to an employer with this certificate, it's worth absolutely nothing. You go to some of these colleges' degrees, and it's worth absolutely nothing. And, or even go, because all of these things, high school diplomas, all of them, they have no real value, because the grant money hustle is in effect. And with the grant money hustle, again, it's all about money. And this is why your pro-black organizations have no impact in the black community, because all they're about is getting grant money and appeasing these grant makers and corporations. They put on a horse and pony show for them, but they could care less about the people in their communities. Sure, they might have maybe one or two very passionate employees, but I tell you, from working in a nonprofit for a year or 15 years ago, employees turn over in a nonprofit like a flapjack, because they see the process at this nonprofit. They see how this nonprofit operates, how the ethics of the nonprofit is, and that it's not about helping people. It's just about making money for the grant from these grant makers and corporations. Just about getting these free money. That people get frustrated and disgusted and they leave because they think that they come in with passion and heart to help people, but then they find out it's just all about making money, making the numbers to continue making money, and getting again crumbs from themselves because the guys at the top make all the money and they give crumbs and little breadcrumbs to the people at the bottom. The employees, some of them barely make under $25,000-$30,000 a year. Now some of the managers may make 40 or 50, but for all the work that they put in, writing, helping to write these grants, developing these grants, cutting and pasting parts of grants into other grants, grant proposals into other grant proposals. They're not they're seriously underpaid and trying to get the compliance and all these other documents together. These people are being paid crumbs compared to the cake that's being made at the top. And when you look at the black community and the sad state of affairs it's been in, I mean, I look at it 25, 30 years, these programs have been all throughout the city, all throughout the country with these nonprofits. The whole point is they want to make money, they want to make lots of money. Now, there may be one or two that are really passionate about what they do and helping people, and they will have, good terms and good stipulations, but for the most part, your nonprofit, especially your NAACPs or your black churches, they're not about helping people move forward. They're about getting rich, helping rich people keep their money from paying taxes on. And they'll take this grant money, they'll just do some superficial stuff, and make it look like they did something. But at the end of the day, that money is not being spent, on the program. They might. The whole thing is that they have these things called administrative costs, and 90% of that money goes into administrative costs. You'd be lucky if a few dollars maybe trickled here or there. That's just the way the business is. That's the business model at every nonprofit. That's why I call them the con profits. And people my family have been like, you need to go volunteer at one of these places. And I'm like, I've worked there. I understand how it works. This is why I don't want to work there because if I work there for free, because I figure like this: my time is precious, my time is valuable, and if you want my services, you'll pay me just like you pay your employees. Or even in some cases, like I said, I'm a writer, so I'm like this: I'll get a consulting fee. I'm not dealing with you. I know how much money you guys make. I know how many millions are poured in here. I know how much it costs per head. And I'm not spending my time and my money to work for somebody, making copies and then brown nosing people who really don't care because, again, your nonprofit is a revolving door. Um, because they do not value people. They only value what they can get out of people. They're one of the biggest users in the black community. This is why there is no hope and no change in your black community, even with these organizations all over the place. Because I had to write a directory, and for it, and they were all throughout East Harlem. They were all throughout the Bronx, and it's just a smorgasbord of people eating grant money, using grant money, spending grant money that they get from rich corporations, um, dead rich people who have put in a trust, and other nonprofit foundations are just circling this money around because they don't want to pay taxes on it. This is the way it's always been. This is why nothing ever gets done. This is why I call it, again, the con profit, because the con is on, and the sad part is the Negro doesn't see, where he stands in this. He just thinks, I'm getting some computer training, which, if you just bought a computer instead of buying, these Air Jordan tennis shoes or this leather jacket or rims and tires, if you just bought a computer and just hit F1, you could learn computers. Or, you could do PC repair by just picking up a book at a library, but you don't want to do that because Negro, again, does not want to do any work for himself. So he goes to these organizations and they do the work for him, and then they make the money off him. And the whole thing that I want people to understand is when somebody does work for you, they're going to get paid off you. And the whole thing is they're going to get more money because they're doing most of the work. And this is the big problem with the Negro. He doesn't understand that if you put more work in, you'll get more money out. But if somebody else does the work for you, they're going to ask for a cut of that money. And the Negro, for the most part, just doesn't understand this at all. He just doesn't understand how people just sit there and make billions upon billions of dollars off him. How the 3.3 trillion, how 97% of it, flows out to other people and never and people get rich off him, but he never enriches himself from it because he doesn't understand, how dollars flow and how the flow of those dollars directly impact him in the long term. Because again, your Negro, he's not a long term thinker. He's not a critical thinker. He cannot think outside of the box. He cannot take the information presented to him and use it to his advantage. All he can do is get emotional, rant, rave, complain. But if you tell him to take constructive action, he's the one making an excuse. Now, I did this video about nonprofits because I want people to understand, how your nonprofit operates, where your money is going, where your donations are going. It's all a shell game. And every dollar you spend with this black nonprofit, like your civic organization, your black church, um, your job training, your job readiness, all of them, and they are just, part of the problem. They're just out to suck money out of the community. This 501c3 status that they have enables is just a way, again, to funnel money from rich people, wealthy people, so they can get a tax write-off. This is all a nonprofit is. And this is why nothing is getting done in the black community, even with these organizations. This is why, like I watched the David Carroll video where he did no choke, no change for the Negro man on the street. I could relate to that because I've seen it a dozen times. Even in my own life, trying to deal with these black organizations. Again, they're just here for some grant money. It's a grant money hustle. They're out to get paid, and they're getting paid very well off the misery and the suffering of the Negro. As long as the Negro is poor, they can maintain a middle class to wealthy lifestyle. And if the Negro were to ever come up, they would never be able to make money off of his suffering anymore. Because as long as he's there, at that bottom, everybody makes money. Everybody's profiting. And this is how the nonprofit exploits the Negro, takes advantage of the Negro, and makes the Negro look like a complete fool. He doesn't see where he's going. All he sees is he thinks he's getting help, but other people are helping themselves at his expense. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.